It's the sounds of Ngabi Nation coming through with voicemail. Thank you so much to you tuning in this morning. I see you, Mpumeza, enjoying that debate of a conversation. Yeah, like he done did the things. Otherwise, right now it's time for us to flip the switch now, as we are joined by the one and only Tim Akinusi. It's All Things Property Explained. Now we'll be talking about property and marriage, whilst busting a myth that buying property as a single woman reduces your chances of getting married. So he is here to unpack what is the appropriate legal contract for your marriage when it comes to property and so much more. Good morning, Tim.
Good morning. Good morning. Good
How
to
are
be
you?
back.
Yeah, no, it's good to have you back in our ordinary settings, our beautiful home, yeah?
Yeah. It is nice. It is
Sure.
nice, I must say.
There are people who actually believe this myth.
Yeah.
Strangely.
Yeah.
So let's bust it. If there's an opportunity to bust it. Buying property as a single woman, does it reduce your chance of getting married?
And
Right.
I'm listening, Tim.
Yeah,
Be
that's
easy
right.
with this response. Be easy.
I know it's a sensitive one, but with sensitive matters, it's always good to just put it on the table. Like,
Yeah.
this idea that a woman who is independent, right, her chances of finding a spouse is diminished, right? So what does independence really mean, right? This idea that you are able to acquire property or be financially successful or well-educated is a myth, because it is deeply rooted in an insecurity, right? And it comes from this idea that, look, if I am somebody who is doing well, then it would make it more intimidating for a guy to want to approach me for marriage. And that's where it's rooted in.
I
right?
see.
Yeah.
And having property is a sign that you're doing well.
Absolutely, yeah, it certainly is, and I think for me the message to women out there, especially the young single woman, is that you should never be diminishing your light to make somebody else feel comfortable.
Amen.
Right, and I think that's how you bust the myth, is to say that it is not a liability, it is an asset. And in fact, when you think about it as a single man or woman, when you're buying property, when you're still single, you have a much better chance of actually paying off that property, because you don't have the burden of, let's say, the family or the kids, etc. Or even, with black tax, you still can have the opportunity to pay off a property before you get into that marriage.
Tim, you mentioned that for women it is empowering, it is a great thing, and indeed you're absolutely correct. I mean, my partner's listening right now, and it's a similar situation that I'm personally going through, right?
Sure.
But also maybe the fat and set situation comes in here. Now he must come and live with me. How can we pass that myth?
Right. So the thing is that for as long as you feel like you are in a healthy space where your assets are respected, right? I don't think that you should necessarily be too concerned that you acquire this property and your partner has to, be with you in it, or vice versa. It just is one of those things that if you eventually do go down the route of matrimony, right? It's a good thing, because you have an asset.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then of course today we'll talk about what it means and how you choose to treat that asset in the context of your marriage.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, is this property explained or is this Mjolo explained? Can we review what this feature is?
I love it.
It's a good comment.
Yeah.
Because I'm not here as a marriage expert. I'm here to talk about property.
Although he is married.
Yes, I am.
Okay, so let's get into the nitty-gritties. I mean, what is the best legal contract for your marriage when it comes to property?
Right. Okay, so there are three common types of contracts, right? And the first one is when you get married in community of property. That literally means that you essentially have to consent with each other when you are acquiring assets like property or getting into business, etc. And it literally means that everything that you have becomes jointly bound, right? The second one, which is the more common one, and I would say the more sort of a modern one, is this idea that you are married in community, or you're married out of community property, right? Which means that you don't require the consent of your spouse to acquire property or to start a business, etc. And then there's a clause that talks about with accrual or without accrual, which means that what you have acquired when the marriage starts, right, is then jointly shared.
Sure.
And what you came into the marriage with remains your own
Yeah.
individually. Right?
And I have to jump in there with an example, and you can guide me here, Tim. So I have my own apartment. Kuto has her own apartment.
That's it.
We start dating, we get married. Then we decide to buy a house or go off plan, whatever, together in this new marriage.
Yes.
But we still have our individual properties.
Yes.
Her place is her place.
Yes.
My place is my place.
Yes, that's when you're married out of community property,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And then you can take the decision to say, with accrual, which means now that we're married,
Yeah.
are we now acquiring assets jointly,
Together.
or are we not? Are we still keeping it separate?
Sure.
right? Which
Okay.
is without accrual.
Yeah.
100%. Now, taking over from that, right? How does my marital status then affect my home loan application, or does it even affect it?
Right. So even before I get to that, right, I want
Sure.
to address the third one, which is the customary marriage, which is
Okay.
your traditional one.
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Now that one is an interesting one because it automatically comes in community of property.
Sure.
Right?
Ah.
So you need to have
Yeah.
what is called an anti-nuptial contract, right? So think about it this way. A quick example. If you have assets worth 10 million, property worth 10 million, and now you go as a guy and you pay 100K for your lobola, right? You've not just paid the 100K, you've split your 10 bar. Right? So your partner is automatically entitled to 5 million of your assets if you haven't got an anti-nuptial contract.
Yeah. And this is in the context of a customary
A
marriage
customary marriage.
Yes,
and the
yes.
customary law.
100%.
Sure. Okay, then back to my question.
okay.
Marital status. Does this
Right.
change my home loan application?
It does, right? Because if your marital status says that you're married in community of property, right, and you decide to go off and you buy this property and you sign for the sale agreement on your own, by the time that transaction gets to the attorneys will ask you to prove that you're married out of community of property.
Okay.
And if you can't prove that, then that contract is invalid, and you literally need to restart the whole thing again. So you've got to make sure that you go into a home loan application with the right status that you're married in, practically. Yeah.
It is Property Explained. Tim Akinusi joins us, and we're talking about the dynamics of marriage and property, some of the myths around single women buying property, and then, of course, the various contracts of marriage that relate to acquiring assets, like in the context of a property. Tim, it is pretty clear that whether you're single or married, there's a lot of considerations to take to heart and to mind when buying a property. So, I mean, where's the best place to always start when going in this direction? Yeah.
So I would say, the right thing to do is to get married out of community of property, because it allows you the most amount of flexibility, and also you don't have to have your spouse's consent. So if there's a transaction you want to do that is time sensitive and your partner's overseas, you can actually execute on that transaction without their them having to sign with you.
Yeah.
So that would be the most optimal one.
Yeah, I mean, I can just imagine we are fighting, and therefore our fight is holding back other things and progress.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. That is precisely it. And it's less admin as well, which we all want.
Absolutely. Tim, we're going to pause it there for today, but thank you so much for great insight, and I'm pretty sure that you have got a lot of people thinking who are listening in, and certainly pulled a couple of strings as well. Where do we find out more about property and what you get up to?
Please, if you are single and you are about to consummate a marriage, before you get into property, come speak to us. Let us advise you properly on how to execute that transaction. So find us on mortgagemarket.co.za or hit us up on Instagram at mortgage.market, and we'll give you access to the top 7 banks in the country and pay you $5,000 in cash back with your home loan.
Beautiful. Tim, thank you so much for joining us, and all the best. We'll catch up with you again next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
On another edition of Property Explained, the Mjolo edition.
It's bust them myths.